Formula One teams have always pushed the boundaries with technical innovations. Double-decker diffusers, active suspension, turbochargers. Though one of the most short-lived would be that of the Brabham BT46, the fan car. The early rounds of the 1978 season were a back and forth between Lotus and Ferrari, both using the previous year's car. That was until the 6th round in Belgium when Lotus brought their new car, the Lotus 79. The Lotus 79 was an evolution of their previous car, the 78, which made great use of ground effect aerodynamics. The side pods were sculpted like reverse airplane wings, generating negative lift, forcing the car to the track. A movable skirt along the side pod stopped the air from leaking, maximising the aerodynamic effect. Having a car that could stick to the track without increasing drag was an efficient way to go faster around the track. And it certainly did. It qualified 7/10ths faster than Reutemann's Ferrari in second. And in the race, Mario Andretti led Ronnie Peterson over the flag for a dominant 1-2. Clearly using ground effect aerodynamics was the way to go. But how could the other teams catch up to Lotus, and fast? Bernie Ecclestone's team, Brabham, was scrambling to save their season. After 7 rounds, Niki Lauda was 20 points behind Andretti, and the team were 23 points behind Lotus in the Constructors' Championship. Chief designer Gordon Murray set about modifying the Brabham BT46 to close the gap and take advantage of the ground effect design. The BT46 was powered by an Alfa Romeo flat 12 engine, a different layout compared to the traditional V8-shaped Ford Cosworth in the back of the Lotus. The engine proved to be a liability for the team, with 7 retirements so far. Everything would have gone like a dream if only we had a different engine. The 12-cylinder Alfa simply couldn't hack it, and there were problems and crises around the clock. We missed finishing race after race because of some nonsense or other, an oil seal defect or similar. The engine was bigger, heavier and thirstier than those in the other teams, and this took up more space in the back of the car. Trying to replicate the Lotus's side pods with long aerodynamic tunnels to the back of the car wasn't possible. In short, the engine got in the way. Compared to the shape of the Lotus 79, the BT46 was more of an arrow shape, designed to rely on its wings. Its side pods were designed for airflow over them rather than through them. We had a great big lump of an Alfa Romeo flat 12, which the cylinder heads and the exhaust stuck right out where the Venturi had to come up. I could see immediately that we just couldn't have those Venturis because the engine was right where we needed them. Murray needed to come up with something else. A bulky engine in the back and the small surface area under the chassis were not good points to work with to improve the car. I read the regulations again, and Article 3.7 on aerodynamic devices said, anything that's primary function is to have an aerodynamic influence on the car must always remain stationary and be fixed relative to the sprung mass of the car. I spoke to a lawyer friend and said, what does primary function mean? And he said, well, how many functions are there? I said, 2. So he said, the primary function is the one that has more than half the influence. He had an idea. He produced a modified version of the BT46, this time with a large fan at the rear of the chassis, powered by the gearbox. The fan would effectively suck out the air from under the car, and the skirts around the outside prevented any air leaks. The faster the engine ran, the more the car would stick to the track. A car that used a fan such as this purely for performance would be seen to be in breach of Article 3.7, as its primary function would have aerodynamic influence. Murray got around this by having the fan provide cooling to the car. As long as it was over 50%, he could argue that its primary function was for cooling. With the fan running at such high speeds, it proved a design challenge. During the first test we had a catastrophic fan failure and tried different materials which appeared to work, but with just weeks to go we had another fan blade failure, so I had them cast in magnesium, which made them significantly heavier. With just 1 week to go before Sweden, we had another catastrophic fan hub failure. I had just enough time to machine 2 hubs from solid aluminium, and the final assembly went off to Sweden untested. The new Brabham was unpleasant to drive. It understeered massively, all the more so when you took your foot off. The fan was powered by the engine, with the result that the suction effect fell off when the revs dropped. To counter this loss of performance, the team came up with a solution. We had this altimeter tie wrapped in the cockpit, right in front of the driver, with a green zone and a red zone. We said, forget the numbers, that's nothing to do with it. If you're coming into a corner, the needle has to be in the green zone. If it's in the red zone, you've lost suction, slow down. The fan had such a strong effect on the performance of the car, Niki Lauda had to change his driving style to suit it. After a couple of test laps at Brands, I started to adjust my driving style. Whenever the car failed to respond going into a corner, you had to put your foot down rather than ease off. This way the car would be sucked down tighter against the track and would corner at incredible speeds. John Watson could see the potential of the car though. On full power in and out of a corner, you had the benefit of low speed downforce that the Lotus didn't get. Brabham arrived in Sweden with their new fan car, though they tried to hide it as much as possible. I didn't want people photographing it because it had taken a long time, 3 months to develop it. So I said to the guys, go and find some material to cover it or clip over the back, and they came back with a dustbin lid. Teams were suspicious of the fan and the protest soon followed. Lotus, Tyrrell, McLaren and Surtees put in a collective protest which was followed shortly by a separate Williams protest. The protesting teams were all members of FOCA, the Formula One Constructors Association, of which Brabham too were members and Eccleston was chairman. FOCA existed to protect the interests of the teams and they acted together. Eccleston's Brabham team served to threaten that existence by introducing such an extreme car. The competition suspected that Murray had a powerful ace up his sleeve, and the atmosphere was pretty strained. Bernie Eccleston applied to the sports governing body for an affidavit attesting the legality of the new design. The Swedish stewards allowed the design to run, and Lauda and Watson qualified second and third on the grid. Our biggest worry was giving the game away by demonstrating its undeniable superiority. John Watson and I drove the qualifying laps with full tanks and did our level best to avoid pole position. Andretti sent a friend to listen to what we were doing. I shouted, "Get that idiot in, he'll be out of fuel in a minute." So we kept putting out these "in fuel" signs. Of course we couldn't get any more in if we tried. It was quite funny actually. On Sunday the lights went out and Andretti retained his lead from Lauda. Andretti held the lead from Lauda until he made a mistake, slipping on some oil. I let Andretti go into the lead, playing cat and mouse with him. Damage to Pironi's Tyrrell resulted in a patch of oil on the circuit, and I could see Andretti up ahead of me, slithering about as if he were on black ice. I scarcely checked to see where the oil patch was. I just stubbornly held my line and ignored it. I overtook him without the slightest difficulty and finished with embarrassing ease, being careful not to let my lead appear too great. Andretti played his part in the theatrics of complaining about the Brabham. That thing was an absolute goddamn nightmare to follow. You go right up behind it and you just got showered with stones. Now suppose there was a bolt or something on the road and that came back through the fan at you. I mean, it would be like a bullet. A visor wouldn't help you. You got Andretti to go round and tell the other drivers the thing was throwing stones out. It never threw stones out. The fan efflux was 55 miles per hour. It was never throwing dust or stones anywhere. Lauda would go on to take the race victory by 34 seconds from Riccardo Patrese and Ronnie Peterson. All the other competitors were lapped. I tell you, it was the easiest win I ever scored. You could do anything with that car. After the race, the CSI, or Commission Sportive Internationale, the governing body at the time, examined the car. They got us to run the engine and measured the flow of air through the fan and through the radiator. They found that 60% of the air was for cooling and 40% was for downforce, not its primary function. So the CSI wrote to us and said, "The car is legal, but it's using a loophole in the regulations. In next year's rules we'll close that loophole, but you can use it for the rest of the season." Whilst the car was deemed legal, Eccleston was under fire from his fellow FOCA members. In an uncomfortable meeting between the FOCA teams, a compromise was reached which would see the team's protests withdrawn. The car would be allowed to run at Paul Ricard, Brands Hatch and Hockenheim before being withdrawn altogether in August. This compromise was put to the CSI Commission consisting of Alberto Regano, Huschke von Hanstein, Jean-Marie Balestre and Dean Delamont, with Pierre Augier as chairman. Delamont and Hanstein were in favour, but Lester and Regano were not. Ogier had the deciding vote and was against the compromise. With FOCA on the brink of a fallout, held together by a compromise now dismissed by the CSI, there was only one thing left to do: revert the Brabham back to its original specification. But Bernie, I didn't understand this at the time, had his eyes on bigger things. He was working on getting his foothold in the Formula One Constructors Association and launching himself towards what he's doing now. He reckoned the uproar was in danger of collapsing FOCA completely, so he asked me. He didn't dictate. He asked me to fit normal radiators to the car. I was very pissed off, but I agreed. Eccleston had eyes on the commercial aspects of Formula One and beyond. By not having his fellow FOCA team support, his ambitions could be grounded. At the next round in Paul Ricard, John Watson surprised many by putting his car on pole in the regular fanless BT46. It gave me unlimited pleasure to put my car in pole position without a fan, and stick it up those little shits. The fan car was gone from Formula One. Its last outing was at the Gunnar Nilsson Trophy Race, a 5-lap time trial at Donington Park in 1979, where, driven by Nelson Piquet, it came 4th out of 5. But why was the fan car so controversial? Well, the concept of the fan meant the car was virtually stuck to the track. To some degree that would make all tracks irrelevant, because the drivers could go pretty much flat out through all corners. The only limitation would be how much force the driver could stand through the corners. Track safety would have to be overhauled to compensate for this, which wouldn't have been easy or cheap. Because it was not speed dependent, at a hairpin you could have miles more cornering force. At Monaco it would have been 10 seconds a lap quicker than a conventional car. It could hold itself on the ceiling. It made just a bit more than its own weight standing still. So what happened to the cars? Well, Eccleston kept one and is still in his collection. Another was sent to Parmalat in Italy. But there was also a third. After the ban we had a whole unbuilt fan car, brand new, sitting around. There was so little room at Chessington, and one day the mechanics came in and said, "What shall we do with this?" I was a bit pissed off at the time and said, "Take it outside and chop it up." So they did. I suspect one of those in working order would be worth £1 million today. See you on the next lap.